The Las Vegas Raiders bye week is officially behind us, and Antonio Pierce just held his first press conference since the break. He gave us a lot of insight, including some big news. The Raiders are sticking with Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback. Today, we're going to dive into what that decision means for the team. There's also some exciting buzz coming out of practice. We've seen some clips of Michael Mayer looking really sharp, so we'll touch on that later as well. But for now, let's focus on Gardner Minshew. With only 8 games left in the season, the Raiders have some important decisions to make about their future. Some fans had hoped the team would give Desmond Ridder a shot, hoping he could bring the same spark that Aidan O'Connell did last year when he stepped in and helped the Raiders win a few games to close out the season. The excitement around Ridder was understandable, but I'll be honest. After watching his performance in the Bengals game, it was clear that he struggled. To be fair, there were issues on the offensive line, including at left tackle, where Jermaine Eleanor was overwhelmed by Trey Hendrickson, who ended up with multiple sacks. So, yes, the offensive line played a role in Ridder's struggles, but when you look at the bigger picture, I don't think the Raiders' situation this year is the same as last year's. Last season, the Raiders made the decision to overlook Jimmy Garoppolo's injury when they signed him, and it clearly impacted his performance. Aidan O'Connell stepped in because Jimmy G was already limited by the injury. In contrast, Gardner Minshew doesn't have any injury concerns, and we've seen him succeed in the past. Last year, he played well for the Colts under offensive coordinator Shane Steichen, who is now their head coach. This season, however, Minshew hasn't looked the same. The Raiders' offense has been inconsistent. Some drives, they look great, marching down the field for a touchdown. Other drives, they stall, and eventually, it turns into turnovers and interceptions. It's been frustrating for fans, especially with the Raiders currently on a 5-game losing streak. A lot of that has to do with the offense's struggles. Despite all of this, the Raiders decided to stick with Minshew as their starting QB. I personally think he's still the best option on the roster right now, and while some of his struggles can be attributed to play calling and offensive limitations, I think Minshew can still turn things around if the team gets more consistent around him. I'm still not completely sure what the Raiders' goals are for the rest of this season. Do they really want to win games, or are they just focused on evaluating the roster? I believe Antonio Pierce does want to win, and I know a lot of fans might feel differently right now, but honestly, the team has to figure out what they have, especially with so many moving parts. Let's talk about Desmond Ridder for a moment. When he played against the Bengals, he didn't look good. He wasn't making quick decisions or getting the ball out with confidence. Some rumors have been circulating that, during that time, the coaching staff, maybe even Pierce himself, told Gardner Minshew not to take risks. They wanted him to play it safe and avoid turning the ball over. Essentially, don't force anything. But today, Antonio Pierce said in his press conference that he wants Minshew to let it loose moving forward. It seems like Pierce is ready to give Minshew the freedom to be more aggressive and push the ball downfield. And honestly, I think that's what the Raiders need to do. If you go back and watch the Bengals game, you'll see the Raiders came out throwing the ball early on. They passed about 6 or 7 times in a row, marching down to the 30-yard line, before finally running it in for a touchdown. But after that, they kind of got away from the pass-heavy strategy, and the offense became more predictable. If the Raiders want to have success, I believe they should focus on a pass-first approach. It's time to trust Gardner Minshew to make plays and let the offense flow through the air. Hopefully, Scott Turner can figure out how to get the best out of him. I also want to mention something interesting. Ben Johnson, the current offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, really turned that offense around when he took over. He had been their pass game coordinator before stepping up, and now he's one of the hottest coaching candidates out there. Maybe Scott Turner could have a similar impact on this Raiders offense. As for Antonio Pierce, despite what some fans might want, he's not going anywhere. All signs point to him returning next season. This is something I've heard from solid sources. Pierce is here to stay. That brings up an interesting question. What if Scott Turner turns out to be a good coach? What if, over the next 8 games, the Raiders win 5 of them? Sure, they may not make the playoffs, and the draft position might drop a little, but that could still set the Raiders up for success in the future. If Scott Turner can help get the best out of Minshew and this offense, we could be looking at a solid coaching staff heading into next season. Antonio Pierce leading the team, Patrick Graham running the defense, and possibly a top-tier offensive coach in Turner. And if that happens, it's very likely that Gardner Minshew could be the starting quarterback moving forward. Maybe they even draft a rookie quarterback with a top pick, Let him sit
added
for a
extra
season or
unnecessary
two
pressure on
games
him. But I
and
mean,
see how things
that's the
develop.
type of guy that we've
Football
seen,
is a weird
on
sport,
different
and so
on the
much
other
can
side
change
of.
over the course of a season. That's why I think sticking with Minshew makes sense right now. We need to see what we have, and there's still plenty of time left in the season to figure that out. To wrap up, though, Minshew needs to be on a short leash. Give him a full game to prove himself, no quick hooks or benching him after one bad drive. Let him play the entire game and see what happens. If Gardner Minshew doesn't show he can handle the job, then it makes sense to make the switch in the following weeks. Aiden O'Connell is likely to get another shot soon, and we might even see Desmond Ridder get a start or two to evaluate him. After that, the Raiders could turn to Aiden O'Connell to finish out the season. The key here is just to see what you have in each of the quarterbacks and show some consistency as we finish the year. Now, shifting gears a bit, there's some good news coming out of the offensive line. Jackson Power Johnson is set to get another start at center this week against the Miami Dolphins. Antonio Pierce confirmed this, and Levi Edwards also shared the news. What's even more impressive is that Johnson earned a 90.6 offensive grade from Pro Football Focus after the Bengals game, and he didn't allow a single pressure. That's huge, especially considering how badly the rest of the offensive line struggled in that game. If you've been watching Jackson Power Johnson's tape, it's clear this guy is the real deal. He's been consistently impressive, flashing with strong play after strong play. Against the Bengals, he really stood out, and that's not something you can overlook. Now, this isn't necessarily a permanent change. Andre James is still dealing with an injury, and we don't know exactly how long he'll be out. It could be another couple of weeks, or it could be longer. But regardless of James's status, Jackson Power Johnson should be your starting center going forward. Here's why. There's more value in having a top-tier center than a top-tier guard. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs as an example. They have the best center in the NFL right now in Creed Humphrey, and while they also have good guards like Trey Smith and Joe Thuney, it's Humphrey who really makes that offensive line work. For the Raiders, Jackson Power Johnson has that potential. I'm confident in saying he's a top 2 center in the league. His play so far has shown he's got the talent to anchor the line in a way that could change the entire offensive line's dynamic. If Andre James gets healthy, there's no reason not to move him to guard. He played there in college, so it's not an unfamiliar position for him. In fact, switching him to guard could actually be beneficial for his development. And with a top-level center like Power Johnson, the Raiders can afford to experiment with James at another position. The bottom line is, let Jackson Power Johnson stay at center. His snaps now will only make him better for the future, and in the long run, that benefits the entire offensive line. So he'll get another start against the Dolphins, and I think it's clear that he's earned the right to stay in that role. I have a feeling Jackson Power Johnson is going to have another great game. Now, I know some people are skeptical about PFF grades, but I've come around to seeing their value. I work for the HOLA, and one thing we've learned is that PFF uses some impressive technology to grade players. They rely on tracking tools and artificial intelligence to generate these grades, and then they have former NFL scouts and experts review them. After all that, their grades end up being accurate about 98% of the time. So, when Power Johnson earns a high grade, it's not a surprise to me. In other positive news, Michael Mayer is back with the Raiders. He returned to practice yesterday, and from the clips I've seen, he looks healthy. Sometimes when players come back from extended absences, they can look a little slow or out of sync, especially early in the preseason or after a long recovery. But Mayer doesn't look that way at all. It's been about 8 or 9 weeks since he's really been active, but he looks sharp and ready to contribute. Mayer is going to add a lot to the Raiders' offense, especially with the potential for a 2 tight end set, 12 personnel. The Raiders now have Mayer, who was the 35th overall pick last year, just a hair away from being a first-rounder. And they also have Brock Bowers, another guy who's essentially a first-round talent. With those two, plus all the other weapons we have, I think the offense is about to get a major boost. It's not just Mayer, though. Hunter Renfrow is fully healthy now, too. Last time he played against the Bengals, he wasn't 100%, but now he's had time to rest and recover. Josh Jacobs is also back at full strength, and Zamir White is good to go as well. Though White did have some injury concerns, he's cleared up now. With all these players back and healthy, I'm really curious to see what Scott Turner can do with them. Players like Trey Tucker and the rest of the offense will get their chance to shine. I'm excited to see how Turner puts this offense together, especially with some of the new weapons, like Mayer and Bowers. We've also seen some behind-the-scenes footage of Turner and wide receivers coach Edgar Bennett working through plays. It'll be interesting to see how their discussions play out on the field. And let's not forget, Norv Turner is in the building too. It's always good to have experienced minds like his around, and hopefully, he'll provide some guidance for the staff. My hope is that the Raiders start winning because of their offense, not just because the defense is putting up historic numbers. It's time for the offense to be the reason we win football games. I want the quarterback to be the reason the Raiders win football games. Whether it's Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, or someone else stepping up and putting up big numbers, like 150 yards or more. I want it to be the offense driving the victories, not the defense. We know what the defense is capable of, but moving forward, it's really about what the offense can do to lead the team. To wrap up, I want to mention something cool that happened. Deion Sanders recently gave some props to Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce. When asked about the idea of his son being drafted by the Raiders, Coach Prime said it would be great for his son to play for the team, pointing out that the Raiders have a fantastic head coach in Antonio Pierce, a solid president, and a great stadium. He called Pierce a great man and leader, and he believes Pierce earned the job. That's a nice shout out from Deion, and I think it says a lot about Pierce's leadership. I've been critical of Coach Pierce at times, but if he can rally the team together and Scott Turner can be a competent offensive coordinator, we might just see the Raiders have some success. If they start winning games down the stretch, that could set the stage for a strong next season. And who knows? Maybe the Raiders will find success with a guy like Shedder Sanders, Deion's son. While Sanders doesn't have a first-round grade at the moment, he's projected more as a second-round pick. There's always a chance he could fall further in the draft. It's possible he could even drop to around pick 15. And if that happens, the Raiders should seriously consider him. Don't forget, some of the best quarterbacks in the league weren't first overall picks. Patrick Mahomes wasn't the first pick, and neither was Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. These guys have become top-tier quarterbacks, despite not being drafted at the top of the board. So, it's going to be interesting to see how the draft and the rest of the season play out. I'm really looking forward to some good football ahead. I'm excited to see how players like Power Johnson, Colton Miller, and others perform. Colton's expected to be back this week, and it'll be huge for the Raiders line. Hopefully, the team can put it together and get a win against the Dolphins. In my opinion, the Dolphins aren't as dominant as they were last year. It seems like Mike McDaniel's offense has slowed a bit, but that could be more about Tua's play than the system itself. We'll see how it all unfolds. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I'll see you next time with another update.